I knew this guy a long time ago, and he was a Christian, and at that time he'd been away from the Lord, and he'd come back, and he'd been taken in by the church, and he'd actually helped him find somewhere to live, but it was a sort of housing situation that was kind of dangerous for him because he was an ex-addict, and there was a lot of people in this housing situation that were still addicts and such like. And he'd kind of almost hedged his bets. He'd made that choice to go with that housing because it was convenient, but he didn't know if it was a good idea. And also he was making a lot of choices. Maybe, I don't know, he wasn't necessarily waiting to really hear from God. He was very uncertain because he'd been away from the Lord for a long time, but he was actually incredibly gifted at hearing from the Lord. I mean, in a way, I know that from experience with him. And what was interesting was that way back then, he didn't know me. He didn't know me very much. He didn't. I mean, we hardly knew each other for a very long time at all. But the point is, he didn't know anything about me in terms of, he wasn't particularly interested in like what I'd done or anything like that. We'd got to know each other on a very sort of spiritual kind of level. We connected, and he kept having these kind of visions and things like that. And one of the things he had was that he had this dream, and he said that in the dream he was in this place that he was living, and he was running. It was kind of very chaotic, and he was running away from these people, and he was running, trying to, and it was like he felt like he was, in amongst people that were not good people to be around, basically. And it was very chaotic, and he was running from place to place, and he was being pursued by these people who were getting him into the bad situations. And all the time in the dream, as he was going from place to place, he said, I was in the dream, and in the dream I was like using one of those street hammer drills, the big ones, yeah, like we call them a Kango here, like. And he says, you were just on this thing, and he said you had these big earphone things on, and he says you were just oblivious, and he says you there was just this dust and smoke, and he says there was people going, oh, like this kind of thing, like, oh, like what, and what a noise, and blah, blah, blah. And he said you were just going, and he said, and I was like going from one place, and it was like, this was a not good situation, going to another place, I kept running past you, and he says you were just continuing in the same spot. And he said God was saying, you need to do what he's doing. Like, you need to do, like, just stick in the one thing, like, just do it. And he just telling me his dream, and he didn't really understand it. And I said to him, well, that's what I do. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, that's my job. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, I do that job. That's what I do. I says, that's what I stand in the street with those things on, and I use that drill, and I stand all day. And I says, in particular, I do it. I says, I have a particular way of doing it. I says, I just stay in one spot on one thing and never move it most of the time. And I just go and go and go and go until whatever it is, the concrete or whatever breaks. And that's a particular way that I do it. Anyway, I've got a very particular way of doing it. And it's kind of just the way I am. And he was completely shocked by this. And I mean, it seems a little bit obscure, but the point is that it's always stayed in my mind because I'm still doing that, like I was doing it today. And that was like, that was like 10 years ago now. And, I know that he was called to be a pastor. And a long, long time ago, more than 20 years ago, and it's never come to fruition. And he's made a lot of bad choices. I'm not saying it's his fault. He's really, the devil really done a number on him, but he never kind of stayed in one place, and he never held on to anything, promises of God, and he never stuck with it, and he let other people tell him he let other people tell him, what he should do, or what they thought was right. And I just stuck essentially on what God told me. I didn't listen to what anyone else told me. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I know that, people get words and things like that, but the only words I listened to, I would just sit them on the shelf and wait to see how they all married up. But I listen to God, what God tells me. That's the ones that I trust the most. Don't get me wrong, there's people that give me really important words in my life, but they marry up with other things that God's told me. And he's told me what I'm going to do, and I've just stayed on that. And, certainly with the call in my life, against all the possibilities in the natural, these things have come to fruition. I'm doing what he said I would do, and I never really foresaw that, how that could be possible. But, I've just stayed focused on the one thing. And there's something very particular for me, meaningful, about that process of using that drill and hammering into that hard rock and going and going and going till it finally cracks. And that is the way that I've approached the promises of God. It's not a pleasant process, and it can be quite monotonous, but I know that as long as I don't give up, that rock will break and the breakthrough will come.